Hello everyone, welcome to our webinars today, and I am Zahwa Nabila. I'm going to be your moderator for this presentation. The theme for this presentation is Journey to Become a Writer, Review and Research about Children's Identities as a Writer. This theme is from an article by Diana Collier from University of British Columbia with the same title, which is Journey to Become a Writer, Review and Research about Children's Identity as a Writer. This webinar will give you an insight about the way in which writing practice that affect children's writer identities, the influence of their beginning development as writer, and the potential for transform writing classroom practice based on finding of existing research on young children writer identities. And to start, let's welcome our presenter for today's Ms. Mirza Ulkhaq from Universitas Negeri Malang. Ms. Mirza, time is yours.
Hello everybody. Today we will talk about an article, Journey to Becoming a Writer, Review of Research about Children's Identities as a Writer by Diana R. Collier. Introduction. In the early years of schooling, children represent themselves as writers in diverse ways. Writing at school can be preparation for future academic writing, but it also can be a site for dialogue with oneself. Through literary practices, for example, reading, writing, drawing, and other forms of interaction with multimodal texts, one draws on identities and constructs new ones. The next part is writing practices in children's classrooms. Literacy practices are influenced by social norms and practices and the influences of larger structures such as school boards, curriculum policies, and popular media. Writing is conventionally thought of as the creation of print in a form that can be easily read by an unknown audience. In this paper, the term writing primarily refers to the creation of text, where print is foregrounded, as this is how researchers cite here use the term writer and writing. Literacy and identity. You can't have one without the other. What does it mean? When talking about writers and identities, it is necessary to clarify what it means to write about and study people's identity. Rosell and Paul in 2007 content, identities can be found within practices and it is possible to trace the sedimentation of these practices into text making. They elaborate how literacy practice surfaces in the text people produce. Also by practice can be the development of writing and writer identities. Writing as becoming. Children need to have chance to create new narratives or occupy new positions as writers. Richardson in 2000 suggests that people often write to figure out what they think and can consider that which is written as method of knowing. This is the research about this topic. Writing practices are co-constructed in relationship with teachers and peers. This is the teacher side. The literature demonstrates that teacher expectations for students were often influenced by perception of ability and identity markers, such as gender, ethnicity, social class, and lead to differentiated writing practices. Students who were constructed as less competent writers had fewer opportunities for participation and choice in writing practices. This is for peers. Power relations among peers affect the access to writer identities. Students took up the enforcement of appropriate forms and functions for classroom writing that were set by the teacher. They also reinforced the unwritten norm of competing with the identities of academically successful writing. In that both teacher-student relations and relations among students influence the construction of how students write their identity in a classroom. Power and status among students can influence access to and participation in literacy practices. Writing practices as daily practices, assessment practices. Writing practices, both daily form and more formal assessment practices, influenced writer identities. Particular daily writing practices were favored in particular classrooms. For example, in 6th grade, some students can use popular culture references such as song lyrics, films, and etc. For kindergarten students, they can use Disney storyboard to make their own version of story. Or teacher can also use personal expression and description of the student's feeling. Daily feedback and support. The research reviewed suggests that ongoing writing support from teachers and peers in writing practice class can affect the identity of competence and or incompetence. Also that students became frustrated and critical when the teacher didn't respond in supportive ways. The study shows that one-on-one relationship can work well for some people and students, but not for others. Standardized assessment. Because of standardized assessment, although most students experience standardized tests in their early years of schooling, there has been little research that directly studies what happened when beginning writers are assessed in formal ways. Students may begin to equate school writing in the kind of writing that happens for tests. Murray in 1997. Labels and assessment. The kind of writing assessment presented in the studies seemed to narrow practice and the potential for competent writer identities. It makes the students see themselves in more static and less helpful ways. In general, teachers often use professional feedback and refine students more narrowly. Because of this processes, the self-consciousness about their competences and their possibility for the future increase. If the way they are perceived, they may reject an identity as a reader or writer, at least at school. It is worth considering how assessment encourages the labeling of students and assume more fixes inherent learner identities. This is the example of the research about this topic. It called Writer Identities Persist. Although there is the possibilities for change in how young children think of themselves as writers or how others might describe one's writing competences, writers in this study were often described in static and changing ways. Possibilities for transformed practice. It seems that to have students with their access to context and modalities, it is an obvious place to start would be to open up and create flexible ways of understanding and talking about writer identities and possibilities. When teachers support students through conference and dialogue, when students work with peers to support and encourage each other's writing, when talk is valued as part of writing and texts are recognized as contrasted, and when students' preferences or choices are given consideration, the potential for more competent writer identities is possible. The suggestions require a shift in traditional power relations and an increased awareness and critique. So I think that's all for me. If you have any questions, please write down on the comment section. We can go back to Zahwa now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mirza, for your presentation. And we will going to move on to the end of the session of this webinar. And I would like to tie up the presentation with the conclusion that this paper review case study of writer identities amongst young children at school, and more longitudinal research is necessary and other source of information about the potential for building multiple multimodal literate identities through developing reading and writing competency would be useful, and also larger scale or more long-term studies that attempt to uncover the complex construction of children's literate identities across school and out of school contexts would be contribute to this discussion. And once again, thank you very much for coming to our webinars today, which is about journey to become a writer, review and research about children's identity as a writer. And you can give us some feedback, comment and question in the comment section below so we can get better for the next presentation, and we will answer your question in the next video. That's all from our webinar. Thank you very much once again and stay safe.